Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stephanie, and I am the director of events for the novel Neighbor. And we are super excited to spend this lovely afternoon in St. Louis hanging out with friends across the pond. While it is 4 p.m. for those of us in Central Time, it is 10 p.m. for our incredible author this evening. So, Gillian McAllister, you have written famous last words. That's what we are here to celebrate. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us at 10 p.m. at night. I'm so grateful that you stayed up late to talk to us. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. It's this is my time because I'm a night owl. So 10 p.m. is like a fun time for me. I'm supposed to be going to bed, but I don't want to, so it's great to do an event.
Now we're giving you like an excuse to not go to bed.
Exactly. Exactly. I get to socialize instead, which is always good.
That is, yes. This is I am not a night owl. I am a morning. Well, I actually don't know what I am anymore. I feel like I'm in a weird in between phase of life where sometimes I can be a night owl and sometimes I'm a morning person. I do like feeling
Mm.
accomplished in the morning. Like if I get up and get a lot of things done before 9 a.m., I feel really good for the rest of
Oh
the
yeah.
day. Uh, and I hate how annoyingly good it feels because then I'm like, yeah, I should do this every day. But then sometimes I'm a sleeping in person. So
Mm,
does if you're a night
yeah.
owl, does that mean a lot of your writing takes place at night?
It shouldn't because I try to write in the working day. But I tend to get lots of ideas at night and get excited at night and like get out of bed to write things down. And I'm never asleep before like 12:30, and I've got a 2-year-old, so it's quite stupid really, but I just can't go to bed. So yeah, this is sort of the middle of the day for me in a way.
Oh my gosh, we're getting you at your prime. This
Yeah,
is great for
exactly,
us.
exactly. I might have like lots of novel ideas while we're on this call.
You can step away at any time to write them down. We're just saying. Um, Before we get too far into talking about your writing process, which I definitely do want to ask you some more questions about, for anybody who's just like randomly coming across this stream, like I said at the top, your most recent novel is Famous Last Words, but you have written so many incredible thrillers. You're a best-selling author. If people are not familiar with your work, can you tell us your elevator pitch for Famous Last Words?
Of course, the elevator pitch is a woman who finds out that there's a hostage situation unfolding in central London, finds out her husband is involved, but the police tell her that he hasn't been taken hostage. He is, in fact, the gunman. That's the quick pitch. So, really, it tells the story of their marriage and a eponymous note that he left her, the famous last words, and what that might mean and whether it's a clue to why he's doing what he's doing.
I now I think about your book. Unfortunately, we see news stories like this more often than we would like, and your book has definitely given me like a new slant, a new angle to think about this. Where did the first kernels of this story pop up for you?
Well, I think, there are a lot of movies and kind of male action thrillers around that center on things like a hostage situation. And I suddenly got to thinking, like, what if I wrote a hostage situation, but I gave it a female slant and sort of more emotional led, less about like the police and the guns and the explosions, and more about the intimacy and the relationships and the marriage. Um, and it came from there really. And then the idea that the husband was the gunman really came from nowhere. But I think that was the way in. And it was kind of a feeling of like, what if I'm not narrating a hostage situation? What if I'm narrating it by somebody left out of it? So
Hmm.
you never really know what's going on in the building, but you're with this woman whose life has completely changed in one day.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I get chills thinking about it. um, for I always am curious to see how like thriller authors' minds work, because as the reader, we get to experience so many twists and turns and things that we don't see coming. Do you know like your plot points before you sit down to write, or like how do you figure out the twists?
With difficulty, I would say. I mean, whenever I tell people this when they're interviewing me, This is what we talk about for the rest of the interview. So be warned.
This
So
is
what I
perfect. Let's
do,
go. I'm ready.
let's go. What I do, unfortunately, and I definitely don't advocate doing this, I do a really meticulous plan, get it signed off by the publisher and my agents, write 100,000 words to that plan, um, have an epiphany, and delete it,
Sure.
and start over. That is how I do it. So usually the twists that are in that first draft for some reason don't work, and the angle I've gone in at is usually wrong. For example, the husband narrated famous last words in the first draft, so it was a completely different novel, totally different. Often the hook changes.
Mhm.
um, and I sort of feel like I learn by doing. So I learn in that first draft what is working and isn't working, and it usually leads to a kind of eureka moment where I'm like, actually it should be this, and so I delete it and start again, and then I do a plan where I do tend to know the twists.
This is how I know that I could never be an author for a litany of reasons. But every time that somebody tells me that they've had to delete their entire draft, I just, my
Mm.
heart, like, the resilience that y'all have and the perseverance that authors have to keep going at it to get us these perfect stories is just so admirable. It's beyond admirable, really. Um, in like
Well,
this case, did you feel like because you had written it from his perspective, did that help you understand him more as a character, even though like we don't understand him as the reader because we're not getting his perspective for so much of it?
yeah, that's such a good question. I think I did, and I think in so many ways the words are not wasted, and I
Mhm.
think when you are an author who just works kind of year round, you have a different perspective on deleted words, which is like every day I'm writing a novel. So it doesn't really matter if I have to delete a draft and start again because I would have been working anyway. Like I
Yeah.
just think every single day I'm working on my novel, so it doesn't really matter exactly what shape that work
Mhm.
takes. But yeah, they're not wasted. They always teach me something, whether it be about a character or about the plot.
That makes a lot of sense. I feel like someday you should tease your readers by like releasing a bonus chapter for us of
Maybe I should.
like a scene from like his perspective, or just
Oh,
like
that's
something that you
interesting.
edited out. I feel like that would be really fun to have read and then go back and kind of get like some bonus content
Maybe I
of
should.
what did it make the cut. How did you get to know, so it's narrated from his wife's perspective as we're
Hmm.
moving through this. How did you get to know her as a character?
Um, Well, what I really liked about this book was I always wanted to set it in publishing because I think it's been written about quite a lot in romances, and I kind of wanted to do my own spin on that in a thriller. And then I really wanted to tie that to the plot. So Luke is a writer and his wife is his literary agent. And therefore, the note that he leaves her, she is sort of uniquely positioned to be able to interpret.
Mhm.
Um, and I think I went from there to thinking about like your dog.
The dog
Um,
thing to say. They're with you. They're involved.
they're with you, they're with you. My dog does the same, so I was thinking, "Is that mine or yours?" Yeah, so I was kind of thinking, actually, what sort of person is a literary agent? And I thought I really would like to write about a reader, and I've not really seen readers be written about much. And, to deal with some of the events that happen, the heroine, Camilla, like, regularly just dives into fiction to sort of forget about it, and you get, like, excerpts of that throughout the novel. So she's a reader first and foremost, and there are traits associated with that, like she's quite she'd rather have a night in with a book than a night out, and that kind of thing. So I think I hope readers can relate to that.
For sure. I feel like that's something that's so special about this particular piece from you, because it does feel like you're in conversation with us and like winking at us and giving us little things, knowing that people
Mm.
reading this book are going to relate to her so much and so much of
I
how
hope
she
so. I hope
goes
so.
through
I
the
love
world.
that.
Yeah. Um, okay, so you did say that you write a very meticulous plan up front. What is that? Are we talking like index cards? Are we talking bulletin boards? Like, how do you kind of plot this all out?
It's basically like I actually use Excel, which is not like a notorious creative tool, but for me, the boxes work as like a storyboard. And unlike index cards, you can like delete them and
Mm-hmm.
change them. So I generally have like an inciting incident and then a midpoint and an ending. And then on Excel, I kind of fill in the boxes as I go. And I have like about 40, which is roughly like 2,000 words, chapters for 80,000 words. Like, so it's sort of 40 beats to fill in. So that is how I do it. But as discussed, my plots tend to go awry and I have to start again. So I'm not sure I should be giving advice.
Oh, no, it's so fascinating to just hear. We've gotten to talk to several different thriller authors at this point, and it is very fun to hear everybody's process and like the differences in those processes. Because I'm trying to think of who it was. This actually might not have been a thriller author. It might have been Allie Carter, who writes like some romance mysteries. I think does like indexing. And then I know some authors like Rachel Hawkins was just like, I put myself in a room and I don't come out for 3 weeks. And that's just like
Wow.
when it all happens. And she's just kind of flying by the seat of her pants with like what's going to happen next in the plot. Um, Famously, you thriller authors like to throw us as readers some red herrings. You want to make sure that we're looking different directions, that we get a little distracted so that the plot twists really hit for us. How do you navigate that when you're writing it? Like, how do you know? Is there any tension point that you feel of like not pushing your reader too far, keeping us like drawn in? Like, is there a balance at all to that or like a formula that you're kind of thinking of?
Yeah, I often have like, I sometimes write my thoughts down on like big pieces of paper because it helps. And I very often write like what actually has happened and what do I want the reader to think has happened. And those, obviously, if you're dealing in red herrings, are two different things. And my biggest piece of advice about what how to like distract the reader is that the alternate theory, the red herring, has to feel really credible and logical.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like it's hard to talk about without spoilers, but I think if I were to be, making someone out to be a criminal, you have to have lots of evidence that they're a criminal, and then you do the rug pull, and actually, they're innocent, and something else is happening, or whatever. It kind of has to be almost the most logical explanation has to be the red herring, I think. And sometimes I do think of plot twists, and I get rid of them because I think but I could never persuade the reader of like an alternate theory. So it is definitely something I think about all the time.
I've often wondered about this because as a reader, I think it's so satisfying when I'm so certain that I have figured it out and like gotten through the red herring. And then I love
Mm.
it makes the rug pull even more satisfying because then I am like, "Oh, you really got me." Like I am
Yeah.
so convinced it's true. So um something I just realized I forgot to say at the top. So for our friends watching, if there's anything that I'm not asking Jillian about, please feel free to drop a note in the you can comment on this video and I will make sure that we get to that. So if there's any questions that I'm not asking, you do not have to say them for the end. You are welcome to sprinkle them throughout as we're discussing because this is really for you guys. So whatever you want to make sure we're covering, please feel free to comment and interact with each other because that's what makes virtual events more fun. Okay, back to famous last words. So I know it's hard to discuss, and I definitely feel that mystery thrillers are like on the more trickier side of things because I want to make sure that we always avoid spoilers. But are you able to talk about something of like what is super special to you about famous last words? Like, what's one of your favorite things about this book that you can share that's not a spoiler?
Oh, that's a great question. I've not been asked that ever about any of my books, I don't think. I always think about setting with my books, and I think about setting in a more specific way than just a town. And I always like to know exactly where my characters live. And I think everybody's house has something quirky about it. Some people have like a laundry room that they use for something else, or some people have like a little hatch in their kitchen and they serve food through it. And like, I think everybody's house has these things. And
Mm-hmm.
it's more memorable if you write about the specifics. So Cam and Luke live in this house that has the bedrooms downstairs and the living quarters upstairs, and it's the upside down house. And I really liked it just as a setting. Like I went to one and I was like, this is really interesting. Like I wonder what it would be like to like sleep downstairs and, you know, have your like kitchen upstairs and stuff. But also it it sort of serves as a metaphor for how Camilla wakes up one ordinary morning and she sort of finds herself in this other world in a way, because her husband has become this notorious criminal and everybody is talking about her and she has no idea what's happened. And the house therefore is like this sort of analogy for like living in this inverted world, and that's kind of one of the reasons I really like it.
I love that. That is, I hope if people haven't gotten to read it yet, they can think about it now. I wish I could like
Yeah.
reread the book, like thinking about your answer to that. Because it does. I do feel like, especially in a thriller, I really love a sense of place, and just like having that grounding experience is very helpful to understand like all the other dynamics that are going on. So,
Mm.
for we talked a little bit about your writing process. Um, when oh no, did I just lose my question? It was about your writing process. I was like, we're
Go for
circling back to this.
it.
Uh, we were talking about place. I think I was thinking about maps.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. I love a map in a
do you
book.
love a map? Do you
I do love
really?
a
Yes.
map. Although it kind of makes me feel like, oh, okay, this is going to be big. Like this is a whole universe. I have to concentrate.
You said it. Oh, this is perfect. This reminded me of my question. Thank you.
Ah,
See,
there we
I was
go.
like, where was my train of thought of thinking about maps? No, a thing that I always think about is, I know that as a reader, if I'm like stuck in a thriller to like, if I'm putting myself into a thriller and it gets dark, I can always put the book down and walk away for a second and like reset and then like come back to it.
Mm.
What is is that something that you have to consider as the author at all? Like, do you ever find yourself in too dark of a place with where you've taken the story? Like, how do you reset after that?
I always say like it's kind of like when you're on a movie set and you can see all the fake blood. So it's not scary because you can like
Mm,
see the cameras and the actors and the people breaking character. But I do sometimes feel like I've taken the book in the wrong direction and this is relentless, or it's so tragic, or this topic is like a little bit too, like, I don't know, controversial or dark. And I think the longer I'm in my career, the more I felt quite instinctively like the siege can't last for the whole novel, and I had quite a big sort of writer's instinct that I wanted to crack the book open about a third of the way in, because the reader needs a change of pace, I think, after the sort of, hour by hour tension of the siege. I sort of had this desire to do something much more expansive. So the siege concludes in ways I won't reveal, and then there's a time jump. And I really liked those bits because suddenly it was like, oh, it's all of London is available now, not just this warehouse and this hostage negotiator. And I really liked that feeling.
that was really nice for me as a reader too. I
I'm
agree. I
glad.
liked that feeling.
Did it surprise you? Were you kind of like, oh wow?
Yes, I think it surprised me because I also think it's like that is something that you do so well. Like that's a particular skill set to be able to take the reader on that journey and like take us
Mm,
this direction with how the story is going to unfold, and then kind of switch it up. But then it was really nice because it did open up all of London, uh, and it just my brain was like more things are available now. Like where could
mm,
this go now?
mm.
So yeah, I really liked that.
So interesting. Yeah.
I love a countdown, or I love like time frames like that though too. Like that's very fun for me. Even in like pop culture right now, I feel like the time frame is coming back of like this very popular show. I don't know if it's in the UK. Do you guys get The Pit at all? Have you ever heard of The Pit?
No, what is it? I've never even heard of it. What is it?
Do you remember ER?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's Noah Wiley from ER.
Oh, wow.
And it's now a new show where the pit is like the emergency room. And it's kind of like that old show 24, where like every
Okay.
episode takes place over an hour. And so you're just going hour by hour in the emergency room. And so it's like kind of part Grey's Anatomy because you're just getting like a typical day in the life of the doctors and the nurses and like the staff of the emergency room. So there is like drama involved because you're figuring out what all their dynamics are together, but you've just kind of been dropped in at like, I forget, it's like 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. on like a Saturday morning. So you kind of just get
Oh,
dropped in and they're serving people and also interacting with each other and you're like piecing together what everyone's story is. And it's just like very fun that it's all over like an hour. So
I see. That's such an interesting concept. And
yeah,
I do
it's
think like readers like structure in that way. Like, I think they kind of like to know what's happening. And like I remember when I read The Hunger Games, there was like a specific kind of structure to it. I can't remember
Mhm.
what it was now. Was it like each event or something? And I remember feeling like, oh, okay, like I understand this, you know?
Yeah, I think it's really nice because there's another I do think it's an interesting way to also have tension built for you. Like there's it kind of straddles mystery and like fiction. There's a book by Daniel Kraus called Whale Fall,
Oh.
where the scuba diver gets swallowed by a whale
Wow.
and still has like oxygen on. So like the countdown is to how much oxygen he has left to figure out how to
Mm.
like get out of the whale before he just like
Mm.
suffocates. And
Mm.
even with somebody who has like very limited scuba diving knowledge, admittedly,
Mm.
like just the countdown was also
Yeah.
a tension builder of like, I don't know, that looks bad. We have less
Yeah,
oxygen. Who's to say?
totally.
And actually, now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure it also was like oxygen, and then had like how much time that had left, or like maybe the scuba diver in his brain is thinking through like what that calculation is. So yeah, I do think it's like fun as a reader to have that because it's another way to understand what is at stake in a different
Mm.
way than just trying to understand it from like the character's perspective or like whatever inciting incident there is. So
Yeah, like it's suspense, I think, in like the true meaning of the word. And I always think my agent once said to me, the scary bit of Jaws isn't when the shark bites, it's when he's circling and you know, but they don't. And I always think
Mhm.
that's suspense in the true meaning of the word because you're reading that and the author has told you he's got this many hours of oxygen left. And he might not even know that. But you do, and you're therefore like privy to this kind of dramatic irony almost. So yeah, I definitely think countdowns like that are really effective.
Yeah, because it's like you can't do anything, so you're just watching this all
Yeah.
take place where you can't actually intervene, you can't help anybody, you can't save anybody or tell them to do something differently. Yeah, it's very exciting
Mhm.
as a reader. Um,
Mhm.
I want to back up a little bit because we've gone to talk about famous last words, and again, if anybody has questions about that, please feel free to interject them back in. But what, like, kind of taking a more high level view, how did you one two-part question? One, at what point did you know you wanted to be an author? Like, what is kind of your author story? And two, more specifically, when did you realize like mystery thrillers were kind of going to be your jam?
Well, it's actually sort of the same question in a way because I've always wanted to be an author my whole life. If you'd asked me at any age, pretty much I was writing a novel. I definitely was writing one when I was 12. I remember doing it. And I got an agent relatively easily, but I got her on a women's fiction novel.
Okay.
So it was about a woman who doesn't want to have children and her boyfriend does. And it was kind of like uh, it did have cross into crime because she was a criminal defense lawyer. And as
Okay.
part of that relationship kind of breaking down over that issue, she fell in love with a client who was accused of murder. So it's quite a different book to what I write now, but you can kind of see the roots in it. That novel didn't sell on submission, so no publisher wanted it. Um, so I wrote another one, which was way more a straight thriller, and that was my debut novel. So it's kind of interesting that actually I kind of did what a lot of people did, I think, which was I was always reading women's fiction, and then when, for want of a better term, but when The Girl on the Train and Gone Girl went really big, I started reading thrillers, and around that time, I was like, I could write one, and that's where I've landed now. And I think I'm very happy in the sort of thriller genre because I do think I push the boundaries of it like quite like sort of a lot, because my one of my books, arguably my most famous book, is speculative. And I've written one police procedural, I've written a courtroom drama. So I kind of feel like it's such a wide genre to inhabit that I'm like very happy to be here. So yeah, so I think I will forever write thrillers. So it's sort of, yeah, the same answer really. I sort of, through trying to get published, I ended up writing a thriller, and sort of I'm very glad I did as well.
I do think that we don't talk about it enough, that there are so many subgenres within mystery thriller. Like you just said, the courtroom
Mm.
drama, the police procedural,
Mm.
there's so many different ways you can take it. And I often feel the genre is like fully lumped together. Uh, and that could just be my like bias of like what I hear some of my friends talk about. But there is so much to do in that space. And I think you kind of already answered this question for me, but uh, so it sounds like you are not really interested in exploring anything outside of the genre. Like you're good with mystery thriller.
Yeah, and I think I think it's a bit of a myth that readers want quite a constrained genre. And I think that's more of a I think it's like an urban myth, because if you talk to people about television, they don't say, "I watch rom-coms."
Mhm.
People tend to view television quite agnostically. They might watch some crime and some rom-coms, and I believe readers are actually quite similar. Um, and also, like, some of my novels, like Famous Last Words is arguably a love story with a crime at its heart. And some of mine are way more thrillery, with
Mhm.
like a lot of like scary stuff, and some of them are way more like relationship based. So I think in many ways it's like, what is a mystery anyway? Because I can think of plenty of, like, some of Emily Henry's novels have a mystery in.
Mhm.
So I sort of don't really view genre like other people, I think. But I think as long as there's a crime in my novels, I think I'd be pretty happy. And I like to kind of use that crime to explore familial relationships, I think.
I do agree that I feel like as a bookseller, people really respond to genre
Oh, that's
benders.
so interesting. That's so
Yeah,
interesting.
I think that a
So
lot of
do you
people
get people that only read one genre?
um y- yes and no. I feel
Yeah.
that there's people who I think more often than not it's like um I mean, we do have a romance bookstore and extension of the novel Neighbor. And so I think
Mm.
it's like people who are looking for a romance that is important, where they only
Mm.
want to read within that genre, but they're really interested in reading like subgenres. Like they're just like, I just want
Interesting.
to make sure that like the happy ever after at the end, I want that guarantee. I'm okay with
Mm.
going through like some emotions in between.
I
And
see.
we talk a lot about like the misconception in romance of I think sometimes people call them predictable, and the word that they're actually looking for is like formulaic. Like it can
Wow.
you can hit certain, and Kate Claiborne has a really like good conversation about this on the internet of like, yes, there are certain beats that a romance has to hit, but that does not necessarily make it predictable. That just means you're guaranteed those like certain moments, but they can be
Yeah,
brought
and
up
I
in
think
different
that's
ways.
like true of thrillers. Like, and I think the stuff about rom-coms is like a form of people doing down on things women write. Because thrillers hit all those beats. Thrillers have a happy ever after in that the mystery is solved, right?
Yeah, well, and I think that that's where like genre, I think it's like a really fun conversation over sometimes how down we are in general about like genre fiction versus
Mm.
like maybe say like lit fic or something like
Mm.
that.
Yeah.
Um, because genre fiction often does have like you're gonna hit certain points, but people
Mm.
love when we sell them as genre bender. And I also think genre benders are a really great way to explore something that maybe feels unfamiliar to you,
Yeah.
but but then you realize that it actually is for you. Like one of my favorite kind of genre bending things to sell within, and you were talking about this, like you have arguably like speculative in
Mm.
some of your books of like um I love to sell like a Simone St. James, which
Mm.
often is like part ghost story, part
Mm.
thriller, part love story. Like you can get really
Mm.
like fun with it. And then I think people are
Mm.
like, okay, I have something that's familiar to me. Like I was maybe looking for like the ghost story, but then I didn't realize that I could be really into a thriller. Or like I was looking for something that had like a romantic through line, but then it was fun to explore a thriller.
I
Um,
see. So it's like a gateway.
yeah, I think it's a gateway to exploring
That's so
something
interesting.
new and finding something that works for you, and also getting to learn a genre. Because I also think sometimes
Yeah.
we think that something isn't for us until we like find, I don't know. You like can have the misconception that's not like for you and it's really just
Oh,
something.
yeah, I get people like, "Oh, I don't really read scary books," and I'm like, "Oh, I'm not talking about, like, horror, like, I don't write, like I'm not, like, writing, like, Scream," you know? And
Yes.
actually, like, this is, like, people I know who are like, "Oh, I don't really like scary books," and I sort of think, "Oh, like, they actually think I'm, like, writing, like, novels with, like, jump scares in," which is, like, not my vibe at all.
Yeah, no, your vibe is so different than that.
Yeah, it's
Um,
interesting, isn't it? The kind of preconceptions. You're right, I think.
yeah, yeah, it's just like it. I think the best way to get rid of a preconception is to like give something, is to give a genre bender to somebody so that they can find the familiar thing and then also realize like that was fun for them, and then they can like
Yeah.
maybe explore it in a more like typical genre sense. But um, I want to talk about how famous last words. We talked about famous last words, but we've not necessarily talked about your other works as much yet.
Mm.
And one of them was chosen as a Reese book club pick, which I know is always huge. We love Reese Witherspoon. We love what her book club does for like getting authors in front of people. So like what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, it was so wild, and because it actually happened to me, like, quite late in my career, it was my 7th book published here, and it was my 3rd book published in America, so
Interesting.
I was quite sort of experienced and therefore knew what it meant when I got the email, whereas I
Mhm.
think possibly if you're a debut and you got Reese's book club, you might kind of think, "Oh, maybe this is just like what it's like to get a novel published." Like, it's like massive, all eyes on you. But yeah, because I kind of had quite a bit of experience. And my first 2 novels had not done very well in the States. I just got the email and it felt like the universe just stopped for a second, just for a second, because I was just like, my life's just changed forever. Um, Plus it was midnight because I was on British time. So I think I just didn't go to sleep. I
Of
was just
course.
lying there, like my mind just like trying to process it. It's totally wild.
I This is a great conversation to have because I think we get asked this a lot by readers, and I know it's probably different for each author, but like you just said, it was like your third novel published in the States versus like your seventh novel published in the UK. And I think sometimes when people hear that, that's a little confusing because
Yeah.
and like the international like publishing rights. And so I'm wondering if you could just talk about that a little bit from like a UK author perspective,
Mm.
of just like
Yeah.
how does that work?
Yeah, so your agent sells your if you're in the UK, your agent sort of primarily aims to sell your UK rights
Mhm.
first. So you get a UK publisher who gets the right to distribute that book in the UK. And then the agent sells your foreign rights, which includes America. So they would then try and get you an American publisher and then try and get you publishers in translation, so in other languages. Um, and America is so big and has so much homegrown talent that it's not always very easy to get an American deal. I didn't get one on my debut, and I was gutted. I didn't get one on my second book, but I got one on my third. When sometimes it goes like that, and then that publisher actually bought my second book, so they sort of went back. But yeah, it's I always liken it because people are like, I think people are surprised by that, but then I would say to them like, well, the thing is, like, how many Australian authors do we publish in England? Like, it's not that many because we sort of concentrate on publishing homegrown talent first, like every market does. So it's actually when you look at it like that, you're like, oh yeah, like why would I think I was sort of good enough to be published by America? When you have all the American writers. So it was actually, yeah, it's an extraordinary privilege to have people who you do not live in that country and you don't know about the culture to either translate you or to publish you and to bring you out to a whole new host of readers. Like, it's amazing. And I'm very lucky because lots of my British friends don't have American publishing deals, and I'm sure there are plenty of American authors that don't have British publishing deals, and it's kind of like, yeah, you kind of don't always get both.
It is, I've been fortunate to travel abroad, and it's so exciting to see, like, books on the shelves that I didn't even know existed, that I didn't have access to
Yeah, it's
because
wild, isn't
they're
it?
not. Yeah, it's super wild, and it's really fun, um, there's oftentimes, and I actually want to give you a second to spotlight this. If you want to think about it, I'll explain the question after.
Okay.
Um, the question's going to be, are there any authors that you know of in the UK that you wish we could get to read, like could put on our radar?
Mm.
Because I always, we've been fortunate that Lisa Jewell has come to St. Louis like multiple times, and she always has such good recommendations for us. And it's such a great way to like discover new authors and advocate for. I mean, we can't always bring it in, but like there are some new things to be able to bring books over from the UK that make it easier than it used to be.
Mm.
So yeah, is there anybody that you're like, I don't know? It doesn't have to be somebody who's not published in the US at all, but like, what are just some of your like favorite other mystery thriller authors or authors in general that you think we should all be reading?
Yeah, there was a book called, have you heard of a book called Apple Tree Yard?
No.
Oh, okay. I don't know if this has an American deal. Probably, but maybe it wasn't super popular in America. But it was the book that made me really sure that I wanted to write like domestic noir. It's basically about an affair. So it's a woman and a man who meet and have an affair, and you don't know why, but in a future timeline, they're in court and in a criminal trial, and she is either like possibly she's a criminal, possibly she's a witness, you don't really know. But what it does is it takes this romantic relationship and it puts it in the courtroom. And it was a real merging of that like domestic plus thriller. And yeah, I think about it all the time. There are so many scenes in it that I think about. So yeah, Apple Tree Yard by Louise Doughty is a great read. Set in London, is British. Maybe it's out in America, I'm not sure, but it's brilliant if you can get your hands on it.
I just looked it up while you were talking,
Ah,
and great news, we can get it. It seems like you've told us about this right at the right time because it looks like it maybe was adapted for screen.
yes, it was huge over here and it had a screen adaptation.
And I think
So
we
yeah.
just got access to it. So if people are watching, you're
Ah.
like, how? It looks like from my brief internet research, don't quote me on this, it looks like you could watch it on Stars.
Oh,
So
amazing. There you
yeah.
go. It's really good. It's really good.
Now you see this is why I like asking, because now we've discovered
Yeah,
new
that's
things.
a great question.
Um okay, I'm taking a slight shift here, and I will give everybody like our 5 to 10 minute warning that if you haven't gotten to ask a question and you're like dying for us to talk about it before we end, we're kind of getting down to that time frame, unfortunately. But what is a thing that you have Googled that you are just like, if the government was watching me and they saw me Google this, this would be a problem? Like, what's the worst rabbit hole you've ever gone down?
The worst one was, for my upcoming novel. It's about a couple who receive a ransom, but the ransom doesn't require them to pay money. It requires them to ship drugs from Mexico into Texas. And my Google history was a complete car crash, to the point where I was traveling to Germany, I think, for work, and I got called into passport control, and it was just routine. They just asked me some questions, but my first thought was,
They've
"They're gonna
seen.
think I've got drugs." So yeah, because I was Googling all the time, like, because if you write about it, you actually have to know how to do it. But to know how to do it, you have to Google, how do you ship drugs across the border? So I do kind of know how to do it now, but my Google history is very sketchy. So if I'm ever arrested, that's why.
Oh my gosh, this is one of my favorite questions to ask anybody ever. It's just especially like thriller authors, because usually I
Yeah,
also feel like at some point the government thinks that like you've tried to kill your spouse.
totally. Yeah. Yeah, like, we have, like, a childminder who looks after my son in our house, and she sometimes comes in, she's like, "How's work going?" And I'm, like, watching a YouTube video of, like, loading a gun, and she must think, like, "What is going on here? Like, what a
What's
weird
happening
girl."
in this household? Yeah. Do you have any rituals for like things that you do before and after you like write a book to celebrate being done with it? Like I know Ruth or no, who was it? Um Alice Feeney always takes a bottle of
Oh,
champagne.
yeah, I saw that somewhere.
Right. Yeah, she
I
talks about it
admired
being
that.
and
Yeah.
then
I
she
don't
gave
really have. I do take some time, like, Because
Okay.
when you're on a book a year, you do sometimes have to start a new book really soon. But I do always take some time to mull things over and kind of get my life in order, and think about a new book in a kind of pressures off way.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I don't really have any rituals. Do you know one thing? Every time I sell a foreign right, so that is my agent sells, the translation rights in Italy or whatever, my husband cooks me food from that country, which is quite
That's
cool.
so fun.
It's
That is
fun. It
so
is
cool.
fun. Yeah, so we had some fun meals. Like I did because you often sell foreign rights in like a block
Okay.
sometimes.
That's what I was
So
wondering.
we would be doing a lot of like goulash, like I sold in Hungary and then like, places near it. And then suddenly, I sold America and we had American food and that was quite varied. And so, yeah, it's been kind of fun. It's like wrong place, wrong time, kind of sold all over the world. So we had a lot of like random food that year.
That was like a fun year.
Yeah.
um, what? So 1 book a year. I don't know how you guys do this because it's just, I mean, as a reader, thrilling for me. I always know that I have something on the horizon. But yeah, what do you do to take care of yourself when you're on that kind of schedule? What are things that you do that don't have to do with work? Like if somebody is not finding you writing, what are you doing?
Um, I think it's taken me a long time to accept that actually a lot of the really important work you do is thinking. And I am always quite sort of type A about it. And I like to be doing my words and I like to be like watching the words stack up, even if I'm going to delete the draft. But actually, I'm writing my 11th novel at the moment, and I have learned that sometimes it is better to stop for a week and think about it. And then you write something much better, having just had a bit of thought. So it is often thinking, but strategically about like, am I just writing for the sake of it and I'm going to delete this? So should I
Mhm.
actually stop and think and write something more closer to like what I intend to publish? So I do try and do that a little bit more these days.
That's fair.
That's just
That's
me.
fair. What are so are you somebody who also reads mystery and thrillers, or do you read outside the genre when you're writing your work? Do you
um,
like
Both.
okay.
Both. I don't have a problem with reading similar things to what I write, and I do read a lot of mysteries and thrillers. But I also read quite widely. Like I just read Good Material by Dolly Alderton, which I thought was amazing. I've never read her before, and I was completely gripped and had a real book hangover after it. Yeah, so yeah, I like a rom-com.
Yeah.
But yeah, I probably read like 70% thrillers.
Okay. That's that's fun. I feel like I often, yeah, hear people where they can't read whatever they're writing, they cannot read, and then they're kind of sad because they don't get to appreciate their peer, like they appreciate their peers and they love them, but they don't always get to read their newest works because they just have to like I think a lot of like contemporary romance authors read historical because they don't want to read anything else that's contemporary while they're writing. And then like, but you're missing out on all these incredible books. So that makes me happy that you get to read all of your books.
Yeah, they're quite separate for me in my head. I probably wouldn't have read like a hostage situation novel while
Yeah.
writing Famous Last Words, but I will read thrillers, definitely.
Are you somebody who outside of reading, are you like a big movie or TV person at all? Are there or music?
Yeah, any stories. I recently discovered this podcast called This Is Actually Happening. And
Or
it's just stories like anybody who's experienced anything extraordinary comes on for an hour. Like somebody who was involved in a hit and run, somebody who they woke up and there was a burglar in the house, like really interesting stories.
Mhm.
And it's such good for walking the dog podcast, because you just get a full narrative, and it really teaches me actually that like some of them are so simple. Like this woman just told the story of somebody walked out in front of her car, she wasn't at fault, she couldn't do anything about it, she killed them, but she just tells the story of how she became, a murderer in a single moment, and her
Mhm.
whole life changed forever. And it was so simple, and it really reminds me that actually you don't need to be very complicated. You just need to tell human stories. And that actually is like quite a good lesson, I think, for thriller authors to keep in mind.
That's so interesting. Okay, that's podcast is called This Is Actually Happening.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, now I wanna go listen to it. I
Yeah,
need to go.
sack off the Oscars and go listen to this podcast.
No Oscars for us right now. Okay, I have one last question before we end for today. And I know you talked a little bit about your next book. It's a hostage book. Or no, sorry.
A kidnap, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, that one's different. That's a
Yeah.
ransom book. What is there anything else that you can share with us? Like, are there any timeframes that we can know? I know we are not always able to share, so we don't want to get you in trouble, but
Of course, yeah, it's pretty much done actually. So it should be out in February 2026. It is called Caller Unknown, and it is about a couple who go on holiday to Texas with their 18-year-old daughter. She is taken from her bed on the first night, and they get this ransom that requires them to perform a task. And the hook really is that the ransom says, "Don't tell the police, and meet us in this lay-by." And the husband wants to tell the police, and the wife says to him, "I'm going to go to that lay-by myself, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get her back." And that is what she does. But there are catastrophic consequences to that marital decision. That's what it's about.
okay. This is great for us. I not to speed ahead of time, but I'm ready for it. So whenever,
Oh,
February next year
I
comes
will be sure to get you an ARC.
um, you are just like so incredible. We are so absolutely in love. Our mystery thriller community loves you. I know we have
Oh, I
people
love
tune
that.
in, not just from St. Louis. I feel confident speaking for everybody, but St. Louisans love you. So please know
Oh,
that.
I love that. It's
And
so
we're
funny
just
'cause you have no idea really, all this carries on like in an abstract way, so you just have no idea as an author really.
is that like okay, I lied. I have one more question. What is that like for you then when you go on tour? Like how because everything happens in isolation, I feel like as an author in terms of a lot of the writing process, it's just done in the privacy of your own home and then you go on tour and you
Mm,
meet all of your readers. Like is that really fun for you to realize the reception that your books get and get to talk to people who
yeah,
read it and
it
loved it?
is, but it's quite abstract because there's been such a lag between writing it and publishing it. So
Yeah,
I
you're already
wrote
done with your next book.
totally,
Yeah.
yeah, I wrote Famous Last Words in 2022. Um, so I always compare myself to like, a band writes an album and then they perform that album and they get to see what people think of that album. Whereas a writer writes a book, sends it out in the world, all they kind of know is that they get some emails. And then like a while later, they like tour the book and they do meet people who haven't yet read it, who are buying it on the tour. So it's like quite a strange experience. And I love more than anything hearing from readers in real time as they read me and they send me pictures of, "Oh my God, I just seen your book on this sun lounger." And like all of that stuff really helps to build the sense of like, this is, happening beyond the realms of my email inbox and my Word document.
Yeah, I often feel like paperback tours should be like there should be some spoiler stops where like you only attend that stop if you've read the book so that it can be
Yeah.
like one giant book club where we get to like pick your brain about like when the plot twist happened to you and like what you were thinking when you did the plot twist and like get into some of the like spoiler content.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just never get
I
that.
always think like a really massive author like Rebecca Yarros should do like an actual like release where like at midnight on release day she reads the book in like an arena. Like I think people would go wild for that.
I do think they would go wild for it.
They
I
would, and
do.
then she could hear like the reactions to the plot twist. Like she could hear the audience. Like I think I'd be there for that.
That is such a fun concept. I would be
Maybe I'll like market this.
You should. Okay. Well, Gillian, thank you so much for your time that you've spent with us today. We are super excited. People who are watching, feel free to pass this on to others. We will leave this video up so that you can rewatch it. If you tuned in late at all, this will all reset so you can watch it from the top. And of course, we have copies of Famous Last Words of the Novel Neighbor if you need them, and we do ship across the country, so we've got you covered. Jillian, any final things to say before we log off today?
No, just like thanks so much for having me. It was so fun. I love talking.
No, it was such a delight to talk to you. I could pick your brain forever. I wish we weren't on like a limited time frame, but even though you're a night owl, we should let you start to work on your process of getting to bed. We can't
I
keep
know
you
I
up.
should it's 10 to 11. I should really be yeah, I should really be at least thinking about it.
Yeah, at least starting the process of thinking about going to bed. For
Exactly.
sure. Okay, well, thank you to everyone who joined us. Jillian, thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of, well, now it's the start of March, but I hope you really get to enjoy the release of Famous Last Words.
Thanks
People
so
love
much.
it. We love you. So,
Thanks so much. Bye, bye.
bye, everybody.